Shifting deficit thinking beliefs using the abundance model, a self-paced professional learning opportunity for school-based staff and educators, facilitated to you by Moet Archer, Shamar Blount, Aisha Crawford, Christina Pullings, and Keisha Woods. Welcome. We are excited for the opportunity to engage with leaders like yourselves in the education field that are here to push their thinking practices in the classroom and in schools to the next level. Have you ever found yourself, or maybe even a colleague, engaged in deficit thinking when referring to students' academic performance or behavior?
Today, the mission of this training video is to define and address deficit thinking bias, learn about the abundance model, and incorporate mindset shifting practices into our work.
The completion time of this professional learning experience is approximately 15 to 20 minutes. At any time, please feel free to stop, pause, and reflect on any of the information provided.
I know you are wondering, how did these beliefs even start in us? How could I have not noticed this? The reality is many of our bias-based beliefs are rooted in the dominant white supremacist culture towards many of our students of color in our educational institutions across the globe. We want educational leaders to begin to challenge deficit thinking biases, as well as continually examine what are some ways we can replace those thoughts with an abundance thinking model.
What is a deficit thinking belief? A deficit ideology discounts the presence of systematic inequality as the result of race-based processes, practices, and policies. Examples of deficit thinking beliefs include, but are not excluded to, the following. Students of color from disadvantaged homes lack initiative. Disadvantaged students do not have what it takes to succeed. Students of color should assimilate to American culture. Disadvantaged neighborhoods do not believe in a good education.
Watch and consider. As you watch the deficit thinking training video example, please consider the following questions. First, what examples of deficit thinking beliefs are evident in the scenario? Next, how can this approach impact students' learning and their learning environment?
Good afternoon, Dr. Blunt. Testing time is approaching. Now I'm a little nervous. I think my students are going to fail. I mean, you know that they're poor and their parents don't even care. They don't even return my phone calls.
I understand that. Most of their families are not engaged in any school activities or even in their learning, and some of them barely have high school diplomas as it is.
What can I do to show them that I care and that school is important?
Maybe we should begin doing biweekly home visits so that we can help them understand how important education is and really to be there to support them. I'm sure they'll need all the help that they can get. That work may be too challenging for them to understand as well.
I love that idea. Maybe we can offer them some gift cards or maybe even some homework passes. Giving them an incentive will mean that they care maybe a little bit more.
Let's hit the ground running with this concept and finally help get these parents invested in their children's education.
Shifting to abundance thinking. Abundance thinking is the belief that students possess a wide variety of jewels, skills, talents, and interests that add great value to their education. The role of the educator is to positively utilize and build upon those skills. Examples of abundance thinking beliefs include, but are not excluded to the following. preparing data and information ahead of time, knowing that students have the ability to succeed when all their needs are met, understanding that all cultures are embraced and are intrinsic to student and staff wellness and belonging, understanding that all families believe in and support education regardless of one's neighborhood.
Watch and consider. As you watch the abundance model training video example, please consider the following questions. First, what shifts in this conversation reflect the use of the abundance model? Next, how will this approach impact students' learning and their learning experience?
Good afternoon, Dr. Blunt. I have some concerns about my class data. Some of my students perform well, but several others have some misconceptions. I don't want my students to fail, and I was hoping that you could assist me.
I totally understand. I appreciate your concern and your positive outlook towards student achievement. I may have an idea. Let's take a look at the assessment as well as your data. Let's examine the students' responses and the questions. Based on that information, we can determine whether the issue is the content or its delivery, and see if we need to retool instruction.
I was hoping by looking at some of the student responses, we could see the misconceptions. Maybe we could group students according to who understands the concept and then who's still building in their skill. I don't want my students to think that they are failures just based on test scores. I know that they could perform better with proper supports.
I appreciate your commitment to student achievement as well as your vulnerability regarding your students. We have to keep in mind that not all students are the same, and that there are differences in the way that they receive information. What works for one might not work for all. It may also be beneficial to differentiate the way you teach the content in order to reach students who may be visual or tactile learners. This can deepen their understanding as well as add tools for you to use for future instruction.
Thank you, Dr. Blunt. I appreciate the feedback.
Now, let's review our models once more of those deficit thinking beliefs versus the abundance models of thinking. As this training video is coming to a close, we are calling upon education leaders to continue the discussion onward. You will be able to go back, revisit, and review the videos and create breakout spaces within your training for the next 15 to 20 minutes. During this time, engage educational leaders in deep dives into bias thinking practices and views that were present in the first video that were not present in the last one. Have leaders revisit the questions in this training in their groups and engage in candid conversations with other educational leaders. Then, we ask you to push what your leaders in education have learned by thinking of creative ways to incorporate these strategies while they are engaged in staff meetings, data digs, and other instructional talks where students are being discussed amongst each other. We thank you for your commitment to our students and hope that this training video will continue to encourage educators to shift deficit thinking beliefs and to challenge themselves as well as those around them that operate in educational spaces with students of color.